Today we're going to be creating a vintage hip hop t-shirt.
Dreadlabs.
What's going on everyone, my name is Tom from Dreadlabs and I've always loved vintage hip hop t-shirts. And in today's video I'm going to create one using my favorite artist Childish Gambino. So we're going to use a couple of techniques here that we've been using throughout the channel from time to time, but I've never really dived into them in order to create something like this. So I figured out, let's just have some fun today and recreate a cool vintage hip hop t-shirt, which you can in order use to create your own vintage hip hop t-shirts for your own favorite artists. So before you dive into the video, if you want to get the PSD files for these, you can become a patron member of Dreadlabs. If you want to learn more, there's a link down in the description, or stick around to the end of the video. Without any further ado, let's dive into it. Alright, so this is the end result and we've put this into a mockup which you can get on dreadlabs.net. I will dive into the mockup later, but first let's start out with the actual design. Alright, so this is the actual design which we put into the mockup. We have a couple of elements going on here. I want to dive into most of the important ones. So what I'm going to do is actually duplicate the positions and photos that we've used, and then I'm going to show you some techniques on masking and creating this text effect. So let's just do that right now. Alright, so this is the actual composition that we've used. We just layered a couple of photos on top of one another, as well as the album cover for Awaken My Love, which if you haven't checked it out, you should really listen to it, or don't, I'm not going to tell you what to do. But yeah, what we're going to do here is select the subject, and we're going to cut out the first photo. I'm on the mask button right here. Same goes for the second photo. So we're going to go to select subject and then click on the mask button. And we're going to do this for the last one as well. You can already see there's something going on here. So actually, let me just show you what I did here. We have two photos. One has a custom frame and the other one is just the actual picture laid on top of one another. So I'm just going to go and duplicate this thing without a mask, so I can show you exactly what I did. All right, so for this picture, I'm going to go to select subject again, and we're going to mask it. And then we're going to duplicate this. And we're going to delete the second layer mask. And here I'm going to use a technique that basically I've been using throughout this video. So I'm just going to show you this once, otherwise I'm just going to repeat the same technique over and over again. But yeah, what we want to do is make a selection of the photo. In this case, I'm just going to do this one right here, and I'm actually going to make everything else invisible so we can see what we're going to be doing. So of this selection, I'm going to make a mask. And if we go into mask view, which you can do by holding Alt or Option on our keyboard on the mask layer right here. This is the actual mask that we made. And I want to randomize the edge a little bit. So we're going to do that by going to filter, distort, wave, and I'm just going to leave these settings the way they are. And as you can see, this generates a random wavy pattern. The next thing I'm going to do is add some depth into this by blurring it a little bit more. So a blur of like 30 pixels, somewhere around that should do the trick. And we want to give this maybe like an effect like it's been like painted. It makes sense. And the way we're going to do this is by going to filter, filter gallery. So we're going to go to artistic, and we're going to see if the dry brush helps here. Maybe the sponge, maybe the watercolor. I'm just going to check which one works best with what we want to do. So underneath the artistic folder, we have the paint daubs filter. I've put the brush size to 28 and the sharpness to 7 with a brush type of sparkle, which I think works pretty well. So now if we hold Alt or Option on our keyboard and click on the mask again, you can see that we actually created a nice frame. It looks a little bit more organic than like just a straight square, if that makes sense. Where this comes in is what we can do still is move this square around. So what we want to do is click on this link button here on the bottom layer. And we're going to go click on the move tool. And now we're able to move our square within the range of our photo, of course. So if we do it like this, we have a nice cutout of his hair with still a part of the background intact. And now we can just click on the link button again. So now we have these cutouts. I think I might want to move his head a little bit. And in the background we have Awaken My Love. So what we're going to do here is essentially brush out some of the parts of the photos. We want to keep these masks intact in case that I will need them or not need them. So I'm going to group this, all these photos together. So we're going to call this one bottom right, left, right, cover. And I'm going to close all these groups, and I'm going to just make a layer mask for all of them. Essentially what we're going to use is some brushes in Photoshop. You can download some custom ones if you feel like it. I'm just going to use the standard wet media brushes. And I'm going to go with the, let's see, Classic Cartoonist. I think that's the one I used for this video before I actually did this myself. So I'm going to put my foreground color to black, and I'm just going to go and start painting. And as you can see, this gives off the illusion that we actually are using an actual brush. You can just, of course, use this however you see fit. You can just create a composition yourself in the way that you feel like it. And if you are not satisfied with how the photo is cut out, you can always press X on your keyboard, which switches your foreground color from black to white. And then you can repaint in parts of the photo. Then on the right, I'm just going to remove his shoulder here. Under the cover, I just want to mainly like cut out along the shape here, because the cover will actually serve as the background here, so it's not supposed to be at the very front here, if that makes sense. Let's zoom out a little bit here. Alright, so looking at our reference, that's kind of what we did here. If you feel like the edges are too harsh, what you can do is select your layer mask, go to filter, blur, box blur. Essentially what we did with the filter in the background here as well. So what we're still going to need to do is cut him out here, right here. And we'll blur this as well. Alright, so now we have the composition done. Right, so now we're going to do some color grading. And what we did essentially was we're going to pick a gradient map. I'm going to show you, hide the filters for a second. And what we're going to do is grab a dark blue color. And you can of course pick your own colors. For me, I'm just going to go with some solid blue colors like this. So now we have the background done. So the next thing we want to do is basically we want to have this guy as well as the background. So we're going to just move him to the bottom here. And next, like these color photos are still a little bit too warm. So what I'm going to do is duplicate our gradient map by pressing Ctrl or Command J on the keyboard. And I'm going to put this into the folder here, and I'm going to hold Alt or Option on my keyboard. And this will create a clipping mask on this photo. So I'm going to hold my mouse in between these two layers, hold Alt or Option on my keyboard and click. As you can see, clipping mask icon appears. And this is a little bit too intense, so I'm going to change the blend mode of the gradient map to a little bit something like soft light maybe. I'm going to do the same thing for the other picture. As you can see, this photo is a little bit too dark maybe. So what I'm going to do is just grab a curves adjustment, try to make the photo a little bit lighter, as well as go to the individual red value and just up that a little bit as well, so that the warmth looks a little bit the same as this first picture, something like this, and they look a little bit more similar, as you can see. Right, so now we have the composition with the photos done. Now it's time to focus on text. So for the title, the font that I use is called Amador, so I'm just going to type out Childish Gambino. A little bit hard to see, so what I'm going to do is just make a one layer at the bottom and fill it up with black, just to show you that we can use this on a black background, which we'll eventually do. Which reminds me that my gradient map should be clipped to the background layers here. Alright, so I'm going to morph or warp this layer a little bit by going to Edit, Transform, Warp, and I'm going to go with an arc lower, and I'm going to actually put this into the negative values so that it's arching a little bit inward. Something like this should do the trick, but now the text is a little bit like flattened. So I'm going to go and press Command or Control T on my keyboard, and I'm going to hold Shift on our keyboard to lose the aspect ratio scaling, so we can stretch this vertically a little bit more like this. Alright, so the first layer we're going to do is a drop shadow, and it's a little bit hard to see, so we'll just turn off our background layer here. You generally want these to be a little bit over the top. From what I've seen, like these layer styles are actually like really hectic, and you would probably not do them in a design which is more of today's age, if that makes sense. Anyways, the next thing I'm going to do is create a gradient layer, and I'm just going to create this gradient from scratch. Alright, so the very bottom of the layer will be white, and then we're going to go to location 47, and we're going to create a nice blue color. And I'm actually going to grab the white again and put that on location 50. And as you can see, there's a little bit of chrome thing happening here. If you want to learn more about these styles of gradients, these fake chrome ones, you can check out my desert chrome tutorial. Put a link down in the description. So I'm just going to make it darker blue, something like this maybe. And this should be maybe a little bit less baby blue and more of a saturated blue like this. And we're going to go make sure that dark blue is right up there with the next white layer. We're going to put this to 75% and then this one to 100 again. So basically you have a double gradient, as you can see. So the next step here is to scale this down, but the first thing we need to do is make sure that it's actually containing on the whole text. So I'm going to just make a clipping mask on the text here, and then we're going to scale this down. And if you don't know, actually, if you hold your mouse over the canvas while in the gradient fill menu, you can actually move this thing up and down. So this is where we kind of want it. We just need to scale it down a little bit so that the gradient is covering the whole text, as you can see right now. So this is nice, but it's not bending, and that's really what we want. So I'm going to bend this, but I'm going to make a duplicate of my gradient just in case that I want to change it later. So the actual gradient that we're going to bend, we're going to just click on rasterize layer. Also going to cut off anything that we don't need. Alright, so if we just remove this as a clipping mask, you can see that like all of the white parts we don't need, so we're just going to trim that off here like that. Put this back on the text again. So what we're going to do now is just go to Edit, Transform, Warp, and the type of warp we're going to change an arc. And we can just move this thing in place and make sure that the hard line in the gradient is kind of moving along with the rest of the text like this. And what we're going to do next is create like the bevel and emboss. So we're going to hold Alt or Option on our keyboard. I'm going to drag in the layer menu our text over the gradient. And we're just going to remove the layer styles with the fill to 0. So this essentially means that the bevel and emboss will be visible, but the fill of the text won't. So I'm just going to change these settings real quick. So if you want to copy these settings, you can pause the video. And if you want to learn more about bevel and emboss and chrome effects, you should check out my channel because I have a ton of videos on them. All right, and the next part we're going to do is create an outer glow. I'm going to reset this to default and create a black background so we can see what we're doing. So we're going to put the blend mode to normal, the opacity to 100% and up the size a little bit. Technique we're going to do precise, I think. Let's lower the opacity just a little bit, maybe a couple of percentages up. And now we're going to do some inner glow as well. Reset to default. We'll put the opacity to 100% and the mode to normal. And just going to make it so that there's a little bit of a small inner white line in our text. So we can just lower the opacity now. Like that. Right, so the last part is actually just going to be a fairly simple thing. I just grabbed a couple of lines that I liked from his songs. My favorite line is I refuse to go back to not liking who I was, because it kind of resonates with me. And I'm just going to duplicate this because it's really nothing too special. It's just the font is called Scrapbooker Script. It's available on Adobe Fonts. The same goes for Amador here. So if you have an Adobe CC subscription, you can actually grab both of these fonts. And what I did was I just grabbed a simple drop shadow, a stroke, and an inner shadow. Basically, the inner shadow is a fairly simple inner stroke, just a really soft one. The stroke is the same thing, but the opacity is a little bit lower. And the drop shadow will just make sure that there's a little bit of shadow underneath. All right, so this is our final design. I'm actually going to save this up. And the next part is actually putting this on a t-shirt mockup. So what I'm going to do is grab one of the mockups from the Dreadlabs web shop. If you want to get it yourself, there's a link down in the description. If you want to get more mockups, there's actually also a bundle available, which basically gives you 4 mockups for the price of 3. But yeah, let's grab the original mockups t-shirt. And we'll go to the t-shirt front. As you can see, this is an unused proposal from client. What I'm going to do is grab t-shirt color, make it a really dark black. Go to replace design here, and I'm just going to delete this and open the guide. And what I can now do simply is just go to my file and drop in the PSD file like this. And with the guides, you can kind of see where the design is going to be placed. And these vintage hip hop t-shirts usually are really large. So I'm just going to put it on the front right below the neck. Now I'm going to turn off the outlines and save it. And if we go back into our mockup, this is what you can see. And if we want to, we can also just change the color of the t-shirt to a white, maybe even a dark blue color. My personal preference always goes to the black because most of these t-shirts are made this way. If you're not satisfied with the shadows, you can also change those. So we can add a little bit more shadow if you want to, or decrease the highlights a little bit. For me, I think this is just fine. So yeah, there we have it. Well guys, I hope this video was useful to you. If you want to get the project files for these, you can actually become a patron of mine, like I said in the beginning of the video. So if you become a patron member, you get access to all of the project files from all of my tutorials, which is I think over 100 PSD files at this point. You can unsubscribe at any time you want. You also get a 15% discount in my asset web store, which is where you can get the mockup files that I used in this video. And you also get an exclusive Discord role. If you go 1 tier up, you also get exclusive tutorial videos such as how to create your own death metal logos or how to start your own Illustrator journey. So with all of that being said, I hope this video was useful to you. Thank you so much for watching. This is Tom from Dreadlabs tuning out, and I'll see you guys in the next video.